Hi, I'm going to talk to you about the Numa 5 Flex wireless pen available at Black Claw. This is a machine I've been using for a little while. I really like the way it works. I like the variability of it. I like the weight. I like the balance. There's a lot of things I like about it. I'm going to talk to you more specifically about some of those things, and I'll go over the adjustments that are available with it and how I think that those can help you get more out of your work, or at least set up the machine to give you different results for different types of work that you're going to do. I'm going to go over the weight and the balance of the machine. The machine is heavier than the standard pen, at least the majority of them. It's also very well balanced. The weight is a little more centered in the motor, and the motor casing is it's definitely a heavier overall, and it has optional steel grips, which are a little bit longer as well than a standard pen grip, which I find advantageous. I'll show you that in person in a minute. Maybe not in person, but I'll show you. And with those two things, it gives me a different sense while I'm using a pen. So when I switched from coils to pens when I was developing the Black Claw cartridges, one of the things that I found pretty surprising was that when I was using them, that my hand got fatigued, which I thought would be impossible after using coil machines for so long, and how much heavier they are than a pen, right? So I thought, oh man, I'll be able to tattoo for 20 hours straight with this pen or whatever. But turns out that you use different little small muscles to operate the pen than you do with a coil, right? A coil works for you in certain ways that a pen doesn't. And I would say that the way that it works the least amount for you is helping push the pins in the skin. The weight of the coil does a lot of that work for you, right? So when you're coloring in, let's say you're using like a 15 mag or something, and you got a good stretch on some skin and you're coloring, as long as you're not, on the side of somebody on the massage table or something, if you're holding the machine fairly up, all the weight of that coil and the grip are just allowing the machine to press the needles in the skin as they're working, right? And also the way that a coil hits compared to a pen, with its super immediate hit, it also helps drive that pin in the skin. As with a pen, because of at least a traditional pen and all rotary machines, they operate, on a motor, right? So it's turning, and as that motor turns, it drives the drive bar back and forth, which kind of leads us to another thing. I'll get back to why my hand felt fatigue and what those characteristics are of the pen versus the coil. But we can kind of delve into why this is happening as well. So if you look at kind of a sine wave of how a pen machine traditionally works, it's half up and half down, and half up and half down. It's a very nice half circle up and down on a plane. So it's ramping up, extended, coming back down, but it's basically like a perfect half dome, and a half dome below where it's pulling out the backstroke and then forward, right? With a coil, because you have the immediacy of the magnet charging in an instant and pulling that armature bar to it, it goes from kind of flat, let's say inert, where the machine doesn't have electricity, and then it grabs, and it's a super hard jump up, and it just fully extends. And then when that electrical current is broken from the front spring, losing contact with the front binding post, it immediately shoots back down because of the tension that you have on the rear spring that wants to revert to its kind of inert space back, right, when it's not charged. So you have this like snap up and then a snap back. And so those are some of the reasons why a coil works so well in introducing pigment, as far as the mechanical work you have to do to get it to work, right? So when I started using the pens, I noticed you have to push, right? You have to kind of push the needle in the skin, especially when you get into like a bigger configuration, because you have a lot of resistance, right? Which you don't necessarily feel with a coil. All the weight is pushing into, effectively isn't a lot of resistance, but it's enough when you have very little weight with a very lightweight pen machine. You start to feel that resistance. So you have to push the needles as they're striking the skin a bit. So that's another reason, that's a reason why I really like the Numa, is that it has a lot of weight and it starts to feel, even though it doesn't hit like it, doesn't sound like it, it gives a certain sensation of a coil just because of that, right? So that's one of the reasons I like that. Some of the things we briefly talked about earlier, about how these work and some of the characteristics that I really like about them, and we'll talk about the way I like to use them and set them up to maybe give you a little step up, and then you can experiment on your own and find out what you like. So these are the machines here. It's a little hard to tell in video, obviously, the weight, but they're pretty hefty, and that's one thing I really like. And like I mentioned earlier, they have a really great balance. I don't have a battery on here right now, unfortunately, but as you can see, if I kind of put it here, it wants to fall on the inside, but when you have the battery there, it's nearly 50-50, I would say, which is really nice, and the weight is just really great weight. Another thing you might notice, I don't have one to compare it to, but these grips are about 1/4 inch longer than a standard pen, and I really like that when they're wrapped. And this is wrapped. You just have a little more of a perch to put your hand on that doesn't include the body when you're wanting to adjust the depth of the needle. I think that's a really nice aspect of them. Another reason is it has a really powerful motor. So a lot of pens, when you want it to hit harder, sometimes I feel like you have to just turn them up, which is more akin to turning up the speed versus the power. But because of the weight and because of the super powerful motors on these, I feel like you can run them a little less hot and they're still introducing pigment at the same kind of rate and the same kind of power, because they're so powerful that it's like the hit and a little has more torque than it does like speed, right? Another thing that they do, which I would never have expected, but I've tattooed a number of my clients, some of them tattooers, some of them not, but all of them have fairly large work from me, commented that the machine hurts less. This is done on a really long time client who's a ton of work from me, and another person that has a decent amount of work that I worked with 3 different pen machines all set up with the exact same cartridge, working for about 5 minutes at a time, coloring and some stuff, and just asking how does it feel, what is it like, and he stated that the Numa specifically had significantly less pain. It felt more dispersed and a little less concentrated and hot, and a little, he didn't say it didn't hurt, but it was a little more, I don't know, maybe how you would traditionally feel a shader in a coil might feel versus getting lined, right? So it's just a little more dispersed, a little less hot, maybe a little more rhythmic, and just a little less aggressive feeling. So, it's a great byproduct. It wouldn't be something that, if the machine didn't work well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a big selling point. But because the machine works really good, I think that's it's something to be said for it, because client comfort is really important. People do a lot of work to get tattooed, and I think the least that we can do is make it as comfortable as possible, which, it's all relative. I think that's all for this part. Let's go ahead and show you how the machine kind of works, and we can talk about how to set them up and the characteristics of each and how versatile just having one machine can be, let alone a couple. So let's talk about the versatility, how they work, why I said that they're more like a coil than an average pen or rotary, and a few other aspects of how I use them, what I like them for, as far as which cam I like to use for what kind of work, and grouping, and some other things. So, like a traditional pen, the grip, how to access the motor and the front of it is that you'll just unscrew the grip, comes off. This one's the stainless steel one that adds even more weight that I do really like for the work. And then it exposes this little quarter turn cap. So you just unscrew this little quarter turn cap and don't just let it fall off. It's got a spring. It's not super strong. It's not going to fly across the room, but be aware, it has a spring. And then inside it exposes this cam. And it just sits right in there on top of the motor shaft. So you can grab it with your fingers. Maybe if you're having a little bit of hassle, you could hold it upside down and pull it out like that. But this is your cam, and there's the motor. So the cam is just like it works just like the lobes on a camshaft. You can see it has a rise and a fall there, and at a certain height too. So what this is dictating is dictating the length of the throw and the duration and how quickly it ramps up and falls off. So how I spoke about earlier, about how the coil works versus a rotary. A rotary is doing almost a 50-50, like perfect half circle, half circle, half circle. These are working a little more of like maybe an egg or something versus a coil that's just almost vertical and then almost vertical down, right? So you're getting like an in-between hit between a coil and a traditional rotary and how they operate. So we have a set of cams here and a set of cams here, and they have numbers on them. So what do the numbers mean? Well, they have a 40, and this is percentages. These are percentages that the needle's in the skin. You have a 40%, you got a 20%, and you have a 28, and, oh, excuse me, you have a 33 and a 28. So what's going on with this stuff is this guy has the quickest ramp up and ramp off, right? Because it's only in the skin 20% of the stroke versus like a 40% or a traditional coil, or traditional pen, which is about a 50%, right? So if I'm going to do some lines, I'm probably going to do the 20%. I want that hit. I want maybe that hit of a coil a little more just direct, maybe work a little bit better for me. So I put in a 20. Before I put it in, always add 1 drop of oil there, so you have a friction-free operation and you're not wearing out your motor early and causing undue friction and stress on that. So there, we put in our 20%, 4.2 millimeter throw stroke cam. Put this little cap back on here, quarter turn on, grab the grip, put this guy back on here, put in my 14 round liner because I want to have a big old line, and I'm ready to go. That's basically it. Now I've got a pen that's ready to go. It is going to hit maybe a little bit more like a coil than a normal pen, but obviously you still have all the advantages of a pen and the rotary machine in that you don't encounter any give. So you're always going to be driving into the skin, and yet you have a hit that's giving you a little something different, a little more positive, a little more power to your elbow between the way it hits and the weight and balance of this machine. And let's say you're done with the line work. You're like, I'm done. Okay, but I only have one of these. Great. Take this cartridge out. You can unscrew this. All right, put it there. Let's pretend this stuff's dirty. You've just tattooed with it. Then you can deglove on the right hand, and you could take this off, remove this cam, and say we're doing black and gray after this. Well, for black and gray, for myself, I like a shorter throw. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go with the 40% 3.6 millimeter throw cam. Again, before I put it in, I'm going to put a drop of oil in there, put that cam in there, cam's in, grab the cap, turn it on, put another glove on, grab my guy. Okay, boom. Let's say I'm just going to use a 14 this round for some shading. Now I'm ready to go. I'm ready to do some black and gray shading. So let's talk about the cams the percentage is what it means, right? Because it's a little confusing, right? Usually you pick up a pen, you're like, what throw is it? I'm good to go, right? But now you have all this stuff and it seems like it's a lot. And I felt the same way when I started using them. I was like, it's too confusing. And I told Carson, who is the owner, Carson Hill is the owner of Numa. I told him, hey, I want to order these machines, but I don't know what all this stuff means. This is the way I like my machines set up. Can you recommend something for me? And he said, well, sure. So anyway, he suggested some stuff, and now I played with it some more and kind of found some settings that I like. And so let's talk a little bit about what I find works good for me and why. So again, with the cams, let's open this up. We'll take this cam out and we'll just talk about them. So this is a 40% cam. This is 33%. This is a 28%. And this is a 20%. So these are all 3.6 millimeter throw. So it's a little shorter. It's pretty short, you know, for a tattoo machine. For if you're looking traditionally against like a coil and how far they throw. And even most pens, I don't think many pens go below that. And I think that's probably wise. You want to make sure you're getting pigment where it needs to go into the skin and not just kind of too much on the surface. So if I'm going to run a short throw, which is 3.6 mil, for me, that means I'm doing black and gray for the most part. I've used these for color. They've worked. But once I got the 4.2 millimeter, I liked it much better for color. So I like black and gray to have a little bit of a shorter throw. I find it works better for me. It gives me a little smoother look. And I gravitate toward the 40%. I find that gives me a really good gray without a lot of needle mark, because the hit is a little more akin to a pen than to a coil, which I'm sure everybody knows. Sometimes when you're doing, if you're wanting nice black and gray with a coil, sometimes you can get some needle marks you don't want. And you got to, like, you know, feather those out and kind of fix them, because you're getting some needle marks maybe where you don't want them. Maybe it's the edges of your magnums giving you a little bit of work, or it's just hitting a little bit hard, or whatever. So I like the 40 because it's a little more, I don't know, pen-like, if you will. Remember, to put this in, I would put the drop of oil in the center of that. Just drop it right in there, put it together, good to go. Now this is what I would call a really good black and gray machine for mag work. Now, I will say I like, and it was surprising because I never really used them in the past, bug pin magnums for black and gray with pen machines. I find that the bug pin mags work better with pens than they do with coils for me, for getting the results I want, which would be background type stuff. You know, I'm talking about that. Let's say I'm doing a black and gray dragon, or I'm coloring big clouds, or I'm coloring some water, or whatever. Anything that's doing gray wash, I really like a shorter throw and a less hard kind of hit. I don't want to introduce it fast. I just want it to kind of introduce it a little bit normal, and I can turn my machine up a little bit hot, run it maybe 9 volts, 9.1 or something with these guys. I mean, these things hit hard, so it's definitely it's hard. You're not going to run into any problems having it push that stuff, that's for sure. And then when I want to run color, I would just take this out and I would grab maybe the 33%. I don't know, I haven't used them. I've used them all. I think I like the 33 because it gives me a little bit more toward the coil, but not so much like the 20% or the 28%, which I don't know, might be a little for color with the way that a pen works. Maybe it's a really nice medium in between spot that gives me an advantage, I think, in some ways over both, in certain ways. I really like the way that it hits and the way that it just kind of keeps driving. It's very, very smooth, it's a really smooth running machine. The way it introduces the pigments, it's really great in that way. So yeah, then I'd run that. So now I have a 4.2 millimeter throw, which is longer. And then I change the duration from a 40% to a 33. So it's hitting a little bit faster on the stroke up and down, but not significantly faster like the 20%, right? So like I said, it's a little bit in between, and I like that for the color. So those currently are my kind of go-to settings. With a liner, I like the 4.2 20%. For color, I think I like the 4.2 33. For black and gray, I definitely like the 40%. But again, I haven't done a ton of work with each one. I've tried them all, and the ones that I kind of initially gravitated toward and liked, and then I just started using them. So I could be wrong in thinking that maybe another one doesn't have an advantage here and there. I've only been using them for, I don't know, maybe a few months. So, you know, I don't have like a couple years under my belt with them. So, but I am used to the last 2.5 years of pen machines. So I do have a pretty good experience, and I can understand the differences in what I'm seeing and what I'm feeling with the pen. You know, I don't know what else to talk about with these machines. Look how hot it is in here. I was just leaking my sweat out of there. I don't know what else to talk about with the machines particularly. I appreciate that they're really well made. They have really strong motors, that they're made here in California, that they're made by a lifelong tattooer in Carson Hill. I appreciate all those aspects, and he owns the company. It's not owned by an investment company or a private equity firm or anything weird like that. And that's those are some of the reasons why we are going to carry them, is that I use them, I believe in the product, I stand behind the product in that I can vouch for, I think they work great, and I really like the versatility and the uniqueness that you get out of these versus a traditional pen, along with the other aforementioned reasons. I just think that it's a really great setup, and you know, you can try one and you can get effectively 8 machines out of it, where if you buy a normal pen, you can get 1 machine out of it. So there's another little advantage there too, right? So maybe you don't like the 3.6, or maybe you don't like the 4.2, but you still get the machine you like out of this set of cams, versus maybe you don't like those and never end up using them. You don't have to get them, but that's the point, is that the versatility is pretty unique, and it's pretty interesting because, like I said, I only have 2 of these guys. Excuse me. I only have 2 of them, so sometimes I'm going to do outlining, and then I'm going to do black and gray, and then I'm going to do color. Well, then I have to switch out that machine until I buy another one. But, well, there we have it. Those are some of the reasons why I use these machines and why Black Claw is selling them. If you have any questions, hit us up. Oh my God, I'm fucking done. My brain is fried. I can't even focus. I don't even know what I'm saying. I'm talking to 2 tattoo machines.